Now, Journey into Imagination Revisited, we presented this just a few, it was about 4 or 5 months ago, I forget the exact date, and this guy, Tony_Baxter, appears in the chat. I'm like, we got the legit guy here? I don't know what's going on. And we get a little message, and I'd love to, we started talking about our event. He said, love to come to your event. So that's how we roped Tony into this. We just made Imagination Revisited. So I spoke with Tony afterwards, and he really liked the way that this came together and the way that it conveyed the ride. A lot of us were on that. A lot of us may have not ever experienced it. It is a ride that is probably the most beloved ride in Epcot that is no longer there, at least in its current form. It's, we lose that. It's not there. Thank you. And we learned about the turntables today and all that. So sit back and enjoy. This is certainly a blast from the past as we present Journey into Imagination Revisited.
One little spark of inspiration is at the heart of all creation. Right at the start of everything that's new. One little spark lights up for you. Oh, hello there. So glad you could come along. I am the Dream Finder. Musical notes. What delightful melodies those will make. I love these flights of fancy, searching the universe for sounds, colors, ideas, anything that sparks the imagination. A sunbeam. That's a good one. Oh, everything I collect can inspire amazing and marvelous new ideas. And you never know what kind of figment you may come up with. Oh, here's my favorite. 2 tiny wings, eyes big and yellow, horns of a steer, but a lovable fellow. From head to tail, he's royal purple pigment, and there, voila! You've got a figment of imagination.
Dream Finder, I'm just right.
Not quite.
Huh?
I'll throw in a dash of childish delight. Look, Figment, some new friends have joined us.
Can they imagine too?
Of course! Imagination is something that belongs to all of us.
You mean everyone can think up new things?
That's right, Figment. And every sparkling idea can lead to even more. So many times we're stumbling in the dark, and then, eureka! What a spark!
How are we going to use lightning?
We can combine it with ghostly shivers on a stormy night and turn them into a tale of fright.
Oh, look, a rainbow. I'll use that to paint with.
Now you've got it.
Wow, wow, wow! Numbers, letters, papers for writing, costumes, makeup, stages for lighting, teardrop laughter.
What about science?
Science? We'll need electron beams and crystal prisms, gyroscopes and magnetism, holy grails
Hold
and
on, Figment.
Why?
The idea bag is full.
It is? Let's start making new things.
Now, wait. First, we must store these ideas with the others in the dream port.
Are we almost there?
For the dream port is never far away when you use your imagination.
Come on, everybody, let's
We
go!
all have sparks. Imagination.
Yeah.
That's how our minds create creations. Right at the start of everything that's new. One little spark lights up for you.
Oh, boy!
Imagination, imagination. A dream can be a dream come true with just that spark in me and you. Mix red and gold from autumn flowers, purple and blue, from twilight hours, green summer hills, and rainbows play a part. A painter's brush, a work of art. Mix red and gold from autumn flowers, purple and blue. What chilling word, like shriek or killer, can spark the mind to start a thriller? Add some more sparks, like dagger, blood, and gory, and then a mystery story. What chilling word, like shriek or killer, can spark the mind? Some happy songs,
Some snappy dances,
costumes and sets,
moose and romances, with laughs and tears, and footlights all aglow.
the sparks ignite.
A brand new show. Some happy songs, some snappy dances, costumes and sets,
costumes and sets.
moose and romances, with laughs and tears.
What about science? Science. Technology, like a newfound potion, allows us to marvel at mysteries of motion. Water dances where visions begin. Science reveals the life within. I'll wind this dial and time escapes. Watch minerals change to crystal shapes. Let's look at nature at this speed, from germination, then back to seed. Skyrockets soar towards outer space. Imagine yourself in an infinite place.
Oh, there are so many places to dream about.
We can visit worlds that were, that could be, and those of fantasy and reality.
I bet I can use imagination to discover all kinds of new things.
Of course, it's your key to unlock the hidden wonders of our world.
Imagination. A dream can be a dream come true with just one spark in me and you. We all have sparks, imaginations. That's how our minds create creations. Oh, they can make our wildest dreams come true. Those little sparks in me and you.
What about bluebirds? Imagination is something that belongs to all of us. So join us now in a magical playground where technology and your creativity combine to make dazzling new limits. It's not the image. Vincent and I have certainly enjoyed our journey into imagination. Thus, moments you get a chance to use your sparks of inspiration in the image world, the creative playground of booking.
You got the clicker? I will. Clicker. All right. Well, what did you think of that revisited? It takes you back to your memories. That was a tough one to put together because there's a lot of dark scenes, and if you notice a couple stuff, we just didn't have footage for it. A lot of people didn't roll their, once things got dark, they turned their cameras off. But as always, you know, this is our final presentation. I think it's one of the ones that everybody's been waiting for. So, Hal, we want to do the honors and welcome them. And we just got to get the presentation going here. Yeah.
Yeah, all right. Well, as illustrious panels go, this is an illustrious panel. We have 3 people today who all played very different roles in this attraction. But I think that's what's really great about this is it really tells a couple of stories going on. One is people that were assigned to do things, one is people that stepped up to do things, and people that were given opportunities to do things. And that is really what all of this is about with imagination. So let's bring on Tony Baxter, Tom Morris, and Russell Brewer. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks, Al.
Hey, right center square. Hey, Tom.
Here?
Oh, there we go.
Where would you like us? All right.
Here we go.
Okay.
All right, switch. No.
Yeah. Musical chairs.
So I'm going to let you start going. So.
We need to be prompted.
All right.
No.
So you want the story?
So let's go. Let's go to the very beginning.
Well, you
A very
never
good place to
start
start.
You never start with nothing. You
Right.
always have to have an idea. And I'd work with Kim Murphy, who's over there on the Seas Pavilion, where we had Triton at the initial, before we cut the budget. Triton was going to welcome everyone in the sea, because I think personalities and Disney and cartoons and all the things that have made this company are really important. The sea is a powerful thing, so we had a powerful symbol in Triton that beckoned for everyone to come in and understand the riddles of the ocean. Then they took another tact with that, so we moved on to the land pavilion. And here I thought of two things. I thought crystals are a natural form that's never going to go out of style. You know, when people looked at crystals back in Peggy's Egyptian era, they were still beautiful, and they're beautiful today. So I thought if we build an architectural crystal, that'll last forever. Now we had to shift the character for this, because in the idea of the land, it's a gentle story as opposed to the powers of the ocean. So we needed a friendly kind of person, and we ended up with a fellow we called the land keeper. And the land keeper was kind of a cheat, because we had another character that we called, just tentatively so everyone could understand it, we called him Professor Marvel, because immediately you think of the Wizard of Oz, and that was the perfect character to describe him. Because when something's brand new and you're trying to get hundreds of people on board to understand it, you try to find a shorthand that everyone can buy into. So the sketch I think you're looking at, Dan Guzet, who did, no, it's the other one, that's Sam McKim.
Okay, way back up.
That was Dan Guzet did of what the land keeper would do, and bringing kind of a rainbow of riches to the land. And again, unfortunately, this show went, I think you can show the Sam McKim one. It went in a different direction. We were trying to do, in those biome crystals, we were going to show the diversity of the land from its richness of the farming and all the way up to the alpine and down to the deserts and bayous of the south. And then when Kraft Foods came in to sponsor it, they said, no, just the farming. That's all we want to talk about, future farming. So Tony's jettison. I went crying to Kim Murphy down he was head of Marineland in California, put his arm around me and said, is there somewhere else you could go? So I went and did a little mountain ride at Disneyland, which got my spirits back up. And then I got a call that Marty Sklar said, there's another pavilion, Kodak really wants to be in the project, but they don't know what they want. And that wasn't true. They knew exactly what they want, but what we were offering was space and the seas. They didn't want those. And every time I was included going up there, they would say, you're a company that does imagination and stuff, like, isn't there something in Epcot? None of these subjects could be developed unless you started with your imagination, whether it's space or it's energy or not transportation. You can't do those things unless you have an imagination. So that word kept over and over again from Kodak. And then up popped a thing that Bob Gibbons, who is my partner from Kodak, did, which was called Journey into Imagination, which is a story for Kodak that they were producing as a 16mm film. It never got through the process because the name was so good, we stole it. No, Bob was more than willing to give it up because it sort of described a ride more than it did a film, so this was perfect. Now, while we were developing the Landkeeper, Steve Kirk, who did the interior of Cranium Command design-wise, had been working with me on another project that didn't go anywhere. We should do a retro on what projects never went anywhere.
Yeah. That'd be a long one. 4
That's a whole
days,
nother
a 4 day
story,
long
yeah.
one.
So this is called Discovery Bay, and
Come on, Discovery Bay. You got to clap for Discovery Bay.
Discovery Bay.
And like all good Disney designs, you physically put them on the shelf, but you store them in your brain, like Dreamfinder taught us all to do, so you could recombine them with new ideas and get them recycled. So Professor Marvel that you saw there for Discovery Bay was in this little show, which was, I think, it's a ride system we've never done. It's sort of a carousel theater, but with 12 little rooms instead of 4 scenes. So you'd go through 12 scenes and a load and load, and you'd see about a 20 to 30 second show and then move on to the next thing. So this is one of those 12 shows, and you can see Professor Marvel and a little green assistant there. Well, Kodak was out one day, and they were going, it needs personality, you guys. And I said, well, they don't want to really have any characters in Epcot. And then they were pushing again, and I ran into Steve's office, and I grabbed that little statue that was there. They took a picture of it and then put it on the Kodakry, which was their in-house magazine. It goes, you know these 2 characters? Not now, but you will, because they're going to take you on a journey into magic. Well, I got called into the office, and they said, have you seen this? And one side of me was saying, oh, no, that's terrible. And the other one was going, got it, it's going to happen. So that was the beginning. And so then we tried to figure out, well, the journey into imagination, what is it? Because unlike space and energy and the land and the seas, which are physical, it was ethereal. And everybody does it different, but my belief was everybody does it. And there was even my mom said, you're not imaginative, if you ask your mom, like, I don't know what to do today, well, use your imagination. You don't have any imagination. So a lot of people were told that. And I thought it was really important that from the get-go, it was everybody is imaginative, which it doesn't say anymore, but it says you're not imaginative. But that was our goal, and we did it. And I'll take you through the process of figuring out those 3 things. I think we have more about it later, but it took us 6 months to settle on those 3 things. So right here, you see the first idea of how could we explain who these very complicated characters are. And we settled on the carousel theater being the best way that a ride had ever succeeded in getting motion picture or theatrical show quality across in a ride. Because you're in motion, but you're hearing story that's more than just passing by.
And who are you working with at this time to
Tad,
these? It was
my
Tad.
friend Tad Stone's right here, and Barry Braverman. And Tom was involved, but more on the architectural and the
Ride layout.
with Dan Guzet taking Dan's sketches and figuring out you can't build a James Bond poster, which he did most of the Roger Moore Bond films, and so you get it and you go, wow, and then someone had to say, well, how does that happen? But anyway, so these were concepts of the theater, and there was a lot of pushback on it being Victorian, so we made it medieval. They hated that even more, and so then the question became, all right, Kodak was very, do we still have the Kodak moment?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
I
so
think
about
it's
the
in there.
colors and all that, so I won't
Yeah,
go
yeah.
to that yet.
We can get to that.
So we started with this, and this was, I think, Andy Gaskell.
Yeah.
And
Sorry.
a little
Baxter,
snappy
yeah.
Figment and a kind of a gruff Dreamfinder, which are not traditionally a Disney look. So we knew we had to go further with it. So we began the development of that.
So
And-
how did they go about softening them up? Was there a specific artist that did that?
Oh, there were
bring
several
it down?
specific artists.
Yeah.
Ex Atencio, I
Yeah,
think, did
X
the
ended,
final.
it ended with X, but I think Blaine's group brought a tremendous dimensionality that it's hard to take a Mickey character and make it work 3-dimensionally because the ears are like this, and then you go like that, and they don't work anymore because it's like eggs on his head. So you have to do these weird animation things where no matter how he looks, you see circles. So, Blaine brought the sense of it dimensionally, which is not 7 feet tall, by the way, but is only this tall.
Yeah, and I think specifically it was Perry Russ who
Yeah, it was,
sculpted Figment. I don't know about Dreamfinder, but
And there's
Perry
an
was the one who
I think we
defined
have
it.
it in here. I might be wrong, but there's a sculpture in this that nailed it. It was the one where we all went, it's perfect. That is absolutely great. So so there were a lot of people and then John Hench weighed in with color. And we always thought that the pair was like a childlike enthusiasm for Figment and a grandfatherly knowledge character, kind of a Santa Claus, if you will, that was jovial but knew everything and you could depend on and you could search for wisdom. And so immediately think gray-haired old guy, And so we built it that way originally. And then John came in and goes, I think it needs to be red hair. Red hair, but it kind of grew on us. So it's like a lot of things that start out being rather silly or strange. But I think it defines it because if it had been gray, it would have been like a lot of other symbols that are out there already. So by going with the red, it was very distinctive. And we grew to like it that way. We had to. We had no choice.
We got used to it.
So I think our next one deals with the naming of how the character
it was easy, as I've told you. Dreamfinder was, we had the Land Keeper, we had Professor Marvel. It's kind of a name that just describes the process of what he does. He finds dreams, or he takes care of the land. But, so that was done. It was like in a day, we looked at our statue and he said, okay, it was a Land Keeper, now he's a Dream Keeper, or Dreamfinder. And then the other one, the little guy, first of all, he was snappy and dragon-like, which you saw a minute ago, so we didn't immediately think of a cuddly thing. So, and I've told this story to death, but there might be 5 people in the room that haven't heard it. But I was, watching TV and pondering what are we going to do, and it's getting late, because Kodak came to the table about a year and a half after all the other sponsors had been signed. So we were already in catch-up mode the day we signed the contract. And so Magnum PI was on with Tom Selleck and the old butler. And Tom had hidden a goat in the garden, and the butler was furious because all the plants were dug up. And
so let's run it. We're gonna run the clip.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
okay, thank you. So here it is.
Hi, Higgins. What are you doing? Cleaning the old rifles again?
I'm going hunting.
Hunting? Hunting what?
The kudu buck that is roaming freely on this estate. And don't tell me it's a figment of my imagination. Figments don't eat rare tropical flowers. Mine have been decimated.
So I sat there and I said, what do figments eat? And then it just dawned on me that there's something that I've coined the phrase valuable mental real estate, where it's a word that all of you living before 1982 knew that word, and you use it to describe a whimsical thing that can't be explained. And so with valuable mental real estate, you can take a word like that and give it ownership. So I came in the next day beaming, and I grabbed Steve Kirk's little statue, and I put it on the table, and I said, meet Figment. And it was dumbfounding around the table. Everyone had that same thing, like, how could we not have, And here's an exercise. When this is over, you can Google the word Figment on your phone and then push images, and practically every image that comes up is this little purple guy. And we don't own that word. That was a word. You heard Magnum say it before there was a Figment. So anyway, that was an amazing find. And so Yale Gracie, our great special effects guy, said to me, the best effects are those that you find naturally, that you see every day, and you just frame them up in another media. So like the Haunted Mansion ghosts, we see in our house every night when you're sitting in the dark and you see the lamp that's on reflected in your front window. But you tell people that lamp is a ghost, and everyone goes, oh my God, that's a miracle. So Figment is sort of the same way. It was a word that we all knew, and now he's purple and pink and cuddly.
We have the story of why he is purple, right?
Right.
We're getting to that.
Oh, we have that. I can't remember where that was in there. Okay.
See, I remember that part, but I didn't get to see the videos, so I'm missing that part. Okay, so we'll go on. And so these are just more explorations of what Figment could do, because you have to, for the team, you have to discover his personality and figure out what can he do. And at the end of it, you'd be at a point where you could say, no, Figment can't do that. He can't do that, because we all knew his personality perfectly. And so where he was stretched beyond. And so many films that you see, you don't buy into the characters because they don't do what you see that the figure itself is sculpted to do, whether it's animation or it's live action or whatever. When people are extended beyond what the character calls for, you get lost. So these were ways of determining the way Figment would react. So I was a child, and I had to present this thing to Kodak. And because Bob Gibbons is now a good friend of mine, this is all the way up to the CEO of Kodak, Walter Fallon. And Kate, we went through 3 Kodak groups in that time, but all of the leadership there would come back, and after they had to go through again space and seas, and then, oh yeah, over in the corner we have a kid that has this other thing, they'd say, we want the kid and we want the imagination thing. Just listen to us. We don't have any effort in space. We don't have any underwater research going on. We want imagination. So they were my strongest supporters, and I think Figment would definitely not be here if it wasn't for Kodak and Bob Gibbons in particular, that hammered home that the reason Kodak and Disney had a similarity is they deal with imagination and they deal with people and characters, and that we had to have a focus. So that was positive. But in the next slide, they had a problem. And that, I think you can tell that there was a company called Fujifilm, and their box was green, and the Kodak box was orange and yellow. And so we got this message that there is no way our company is ever going to be involved with something that looks green that represents Kodak. So we had to go to work and change things. So not going to work, yeah. So poof, make him pink, make him blue, like Sleeping Beauty. And so now we had the right, I think everything was right on board, and we weren't going to make him yellow and orange. So the compromise on that was that we can put him in a little sweater that's yellow and orange, but he's a passionate purple figment, and that, when we described it, I think that had a big bearing on Richard and Robert Sherman's ability to musicalize the journey into imagination, which was through the process of collecting, which we saw in the film, and then storing. Right here in this room, you're storing what I'm saying and what everyone else said here, and then reassembling it all to do new things, which is what you just showed us you did, with all the input of hundreds of people that took those videos and all the effort you guys brought to it. It's something that belongs to all of us, and whether you're baking a birthday cake for your child and putting your effort in and designing the top of it, it's not an exclusive thing at all. It's personal. So we were now at the point where we had that. The Sherman brothers joined us and helped us take the 3.5-minute speech there and turn it into a musicalized passage that I wouldn't say it's totally an earworm, but it's definitely memorable, and it got its point across in a ride. And the sad thing about losing that turntable is it's the only time we've ever had that ability to get our message across and then send people out into the ride scenes knowing, oh, look what Figment's doing over there, look what Figment's, instead of, what's that purple thing over there doing, and what's that old man over there doing? You know them. So you get through this stage, and then, like I said, it moves into dimensionality. And here you can see Dreamfinder, again, with the red hair. But in the black and white clay sculpt there, you can still imagine him as being the traditional gray-haired.
It looks like he wants to sell me chicken, too.
Yeah, right.
It's
Colonel
Shakespearean on the left there,
Yeah, so they explore that. But this was the one that nailed it with a little pot there where he's opening the rainbow pot. That is a clay sculpt, and then the technician there is buttering the hot melt, we called it, which was a rubber, gross stuff to work with. It sweats oil, after a time. But the cool thing about it is you can put the head on, and then you take a hot, like an old wood burner tool, and heat up the melted material, and it fuses together. So you can get in and out of the skin. But it also created the problem that if you rode the ride after it had been buttered about 40 times, you had like, a Godzilla figment, and warts and all kinds of things where they'd add a little patch to fill a hole or something like that.
Bob Gurr told us something very interesting today. I don't know if we need to repeat it the way that he did, but he was telling us about the material in a conversation I was having with Tony, with him, about the Walt Disney World Company was the #2 consumer of this particular plastic and rubber. The #1 industry is the adult industry. So.
All right.
Moving on.
We're now back for part 2 of the story. So this is what we ended up with there in the final. This is the one for the final act. And I think he's still in the attraction now, misappropriated into a different scene. So the relationship, which is so critical in forming great comedy teams. So you think of Laurel and Hardy or Abbott and Costello or Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis. You have a straight man and a comedian, so they can play off of each other. So you can't just throw two comedians like Eric Idle and Figment together. There's two crazy people. And there's nowhere to go.
Is this one early on when they were still finding his color a little bit, or is it just the photo?
I think it's the photo.
Okay.
I thought you enhanced it with,
I didn't touch this one. I did fix some others.
It doesn't bother me.
I can't remember what the next video is. Oh, it's the interview.
It's the biggest promotional project Kodak has undertaken in its 100-year history, an anniversary just celebrated last year. Kodak's pavilion will be called A Journey into Imagination, and groundbreaking ceremonies for the project were held Tuesday morning.
One bright idea, one right connection can give our lives a new direction.
Dreamfinder and Figment are two of the latest Disney characters made especially for Kodak's Imagination Adventure. When completed, the adventure will be a 12-minute ride where one discovers the building blocks in the creation of new ideas. Kodak officials would not disclose just how much they're spending on this trip through your imagination, only that it's a multi-million-dollar investment, just a part of Epcot's overall $800 million price tag. Whatever the cost is it all worth it? With the millions of pictures they expect to be shot, Kodak thinks so.
Gee, and $800 million wouldn't even buy Galaxy's Edge. Yeah, so you can see there, and we've heard a lot of things. I learned so much at this. This has been the best experience I've had going to one of these conventions, really. But I want to pause on this voice. Had we gone to conclusion with that voice, that element, and that someone took the care to correct that, it shows you how important every little piece of it is. Because you could do all of this building and constructing, and then have a grating sound like that that would have destroyed it. So we thought, what are we going to do? So we put an ad in our Imagineering Weekly magazine saying that anybody that comes up with the answer or can do it is going to the 33 Club for a dinner for four, and nobody did it. We got nothing.
That had worked in the past, though, because I found out that the yelling of the Yeti, the abominable snowman, was an employee.
Yes, it was. It was the guy that ran the blueprint room.
Oh, yeah.
Can't think of his name right now. But
Dennis Meekum.
Dennis Meekum, thank you. And so I was desperate. We'd had Connie Stevens in, and she had a cackly little laugh that I thought, maybe that's it. And we got her in there, and it was so embarrassing to say to someone who you admired and had a great career and was probably struggling to stay employed, no. It's not good. So I went to Randy Bright, and Randy was a genius who died way early in his potential career through an accident. And I said, Randy, I don't know what to do. I said, we've had men, we've had women, we have boys, girls, we've had everybody. It doesn't work. And he says, well, Figment's only that tall. don't you think the voice should feel like it emanates from a small person, somebody that's little? And ding, the light bulb went on. And because he was the most known actor of his stature in Hollywood, Billy Barty came in immediately, went into the room, and we had the little model on the table, so we'd look at that rather than looking at the performer. And his voice came on, and we just said, that's Figment. There was no question about it. It was absolute. So, and he was a nice person. And the one thing he said, we went to lunch after that, and I said, you nailed it. And he said, people misthink that every single small person is an actor, because they, you look at them and you say, oh, look at the little person over there. He said, they're not actors, they're little people. I'm an actor.
And he was. I mean, he was a fantastic
all
actor.
the way to the 30s. The roles he did. I don't want to get off color after your moment, but he did a movie. He did a movie called The Day of the Locusts, and he has a very nasty line in there. And so we were showing the final tape of scene 3 where, Figment pops up out of the back thing, and we put in the line from that movie, which was, open that door open, I'm freezing my da-da-da. And Marty's face, back to part 3.
That's right, they're filling it, they're using their imagination to fill in the blanks.
See, we all have imaginations, right? Okay, so on to building this model, and you can see me there with Tad Stones is in this picture, so he's kind of here by proxy. But I'm over on the, would it be the left side to you, I guess? Left side?
They're still their left, yeah.
Yeah, and then Andy Gaskell, who went on to art direct The Lion King, the movie, and countless other productions over at the studio, and Tad Stones, who became a great animator, suggested doing the sequels of like Aladdin, King of Thieves, and whatnot. They went on to make Quantums of Money, and they said, thank you, Tad. Feel free to give us all your ideas from now on, but go away, which was so wrong. And then Jeff Burke, who did Kitchen Cabaret. And so those were some of the initial people working on laying this ride out. But I have to call out a couple of other people too. That John Stone, I think his name was mentioned by Trevor. He was a genius and could do anything in the world and would do it over and over and over again without any prompting. Like you'd say, well, I don't know if that's quite the right thing. Okay, I'll do it again. I'll do it again. So having those kind of people to get through a tremendous amount in half the time that all the other pavilions did, and you couldn't afford to turn it on to Tom, who would make a working model, drawing, and everything of it until we worked all that stuff. So to have someone like John Stone who could do 3 versions of the same model in a day was terrific. Okay, it's not going to be medieval. We'll do it over again. It'll be, the way you see it now. So I'm sitting in the revolving theater, and I think I have a couple of my drawings down there on the floor, and we're all pondering how we can do this. And you can see the final sequence of the ride over just on the other side of my arm. Did you have something else you wanted me to say about it?
No, that's great.
Okay,
that's
keep
great.
going then.
And I'm not, we're going to get a surprise here because I can. Oh, this is the how imagination works. So here's your
Okay, so we're going to go through the 3 things. So
yes.
This was after one of the final meetings with Kodak, and like I told you, it took us 6 months to come up with these 3 simple little things that you're seeing here. First being gathering, which would eventually be the dream vehicle, taking us through the clouds together, colors and shapes and sounds and concepts that you'd use to build something new. And then you got to store it. So rather than going into the brain, which would be very disconcerting in a ride that's colorful and wonderful, we went into the dream port and had cloud banks and cases filled with applause and musical notes and bird cages, and we had the tornado from The Wizard of Oz going in the corner.
And spark jars.
Yeah, and we had there were so many in your film because everyone wanted to, they were bright and people would take pictures, but they were not the featured part of it. We had the largest hologram, which was in the world, in the Deep Thoughts tank. And it was one of those things where you fall in love with the technology. Wow, we're going to have the largest hologram ever made. And then you put it in the ride and people go, why is it blurry?
Yeah.
Because you could have done it with special effects and
right.
not that is. So anyway, then the final part was recombining all of these things. So what you see here in the 3 was something that we drilled into the Richard and Robert Sherman gather, store, recombine, and they spit out one little spark from that and captured it all so brilliantly. And it seems effortless, but I would say the biggest challenge on what are we going to say, because we can't say here's the land, here's the seas, or whatever. We have to make up something. And so getting us into the realm of gathering and storing and recombining and doing it musically so it's an earworm was the breakthrough. And when they came in with that, and we had a previous demo track that Bob Moline, who did most of the Epcot music, and it was good. It was, let's all take a journey into imagination. But it didn't tell us anything about how do we, the process and all that. So this sort of cemented it. And again, it looks like just a scrap of mimeograph paper with notes on it, but there it is. So now we're getting close to Tom.
Yeah.
This is, this would be to Steve Kirk, who again, Cranium Command, not Fairy Tales, with Rolly. And most important of all, the key lead on Disney Sea in Tokyo. Probably one of the best parks we've ever done. So, you know, again, you start out with a whimsical, you know, I say, okay, do a whimsical flying vehicle thing. And so he's modest. And everyone goes, oh, yeah, that's really neat. And then it expands up and, well, what would he be sucking into that thing? And you know, you start to think of what would be all the raw tools that we use in our mind. We have 26 letters stored there that we can build anything that a supercomputer can do out of the brain cells we have. So it began to develop a reality to an unreality. And I think here you can see the crystallization of the final thing, which Tom did. From all of that, and I'll let him talk maybe here. Is that good?
Oh,
yeah.
That's someone who looks like me, but with a lot of hair. And that thing landed on my desk one day. Here's this flying machine that Steve Kirk has come up with. He built the model. And at this time, I believe I had just finished the layout with a turntable. We didn't know exactly what was going on the turntable. We knew it would be divided into either 4 or 5 parts. Actually, I think at this time we still had the double-decker, maybe. So
there were 2, you got off upstairs rather than getting off downstairs and
right.
taking the thing, and so we had a second conclusion show.
That's right. So, and that way you would trickle down and then immediately go into the Magic Eye Theater after you had finished the ImageWorks. And that was perfect, except it was over budget. And so, and this was discovered, I think, at the end of the 6 months. So we had to, and unless we could get the drawing package done right away, this would not open, any part of it would open in October.
Just the 3D theater, maybe. If we're lucky.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, previous to that, kind of a side point, there was no architect on this project for months because they didn't know that they were going to be doing an imagination pavilion, and all the architects were assigned to the pavilions that were already, you know, some of them were behind schedule. So I was doing the layout of the pavilion, the layout of the attraction, and then this model dropped on my desk. And it was really cool, you know. I had to do the working drawings for that entire vehicle dream catching machine.
And he also went down to Disneyland to the gourmet shop and bought all the antique copper molds.
Jello molds.
Jello molds that were glued on the side of these things, and we needed 5 of them.
Yeah, I mean, we wanted to, you know, as many parts that you can find off the shelf in a hardware store as possible, but there actually didn't end up being very many things we could use. There was stuff from some auto part stores, but a lot of this stuff had to be sculpted or cast. And there were 5 of them.
You told when we were talking, you told me about the story of the pattern that is now on everybody's watch too.
Oh,
yes.
Right. So yeah, well, we had a nickname for that bag, which was the bee butt. It's a big bee butt. And Steve's model had this, you know, scaled plaid pattern on it, and I discovered that, you know, if you went into a fabric shop or something, you couldn't get scaled up plaid. there was some golf pants were like the only thing that had like in the 70s, yeah. And oh boy, this is gonna probably be something that has to be custom made. So I kind of put it out of my mind, but one night I was at Pier 1 Imports, doing the fine shopping for my new apartment. And they had bags stacked up, on sale, this plaid pattern that was exactly what we were looking for. So just bought a bunch of those. and voila, it did the trick. So yeah, it was kind of a hybrid of found parts and pieces that they had to specially make. And I added the little wings on the little, it's like a rudder. That wasn't on Steve's model. I actually kind of stylized it a little bit more just to get it kind of perfect, because I wanted to make it something that you would want to buy at the shop at the end.
It was $2,000, and then I talked myself into buying it. And when I came back, it was $5,000. I couldn't buy that. So then I went home and I said, well, okay, I've got to have it. And then it came back to Epcot. It was $10,000.
We had the same experience. I don't remember being quite that much, but I remember factoring in my Disney discount with it.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'll get it the next time I'm here.
Yeah.
And every time I came, it was like more and more.
Double.
Yeah, so the whole reason I wanted to kind of redesign it a little bit, I never actually, took part in, and I never bought one.
Whoa. But I think what's really great about your story in Imagineering is how you would plus things. You would add little bits. And I think
Steve was completely down with that. He was, he's like, yes, this was...
Make it better.
Yeah, exactly. That is the tradition of plussing, and it's refining,
I want to make a comment there that we sometimes get backwards with this now, because if you have a great idea, plussing it is wonderful. If you start by saying, it's not that good, but if we throw a lot of stuff on it, it'll look okay, that's where you get into trouble. And so many projects I see now, you've got a lot of giga out there, but there's not a solid thing underneath it. So you were well within your range going on something that was so beautifully conceived already, and adding it and making it
And
better.
the other thing you don't want to do is just change for change's sake either. Also, you don't want to just copy something that, could be better. So I went along with that philosophy, but this was all tied into the turntable. Everything was connected to everything else.
And there were 5 of these vehicles advanced 20 seconds in the show, or 40 seconds, I think, in the show. So, one was seeing the first scene, the second part of it. And what was brilliant about that is it was a rear screen projection encountering the same projectors. All 5 theaters and all 5 Dream vehicles were getting the same projectors. They just moved into the image. So those images that you saw floating through the room were not floating through the room. The room was floating through the images. And it was just amazing to be underneath there and watch the whole.
And it took a lot of analysis to figure out that there were sightline issues, for one thing. There were capacity issues, speed issues. Everything was absolutely tied together. You couldn't make one change without it impacting another. So, for example, the reason why the vehicles are 7 passengers and teardrop shape has to do with the rotation, the speed, how close you can crunch them together, because there were sightline issues. So if they were spread any further apart, you'd be able to see, behind the screen, behind the scenes, you'd be able to see the machine that's pushing out the puff balls. So it was kind of, it was just like a Swiss clock, I guess. Then we actually made a rotating exposure sheet, if you know what an exposure sheet from animation is, where we clicked off 1 second around this big rotating disc, and that was to develop the dialogue so that we would know how much time you had to make a point, how much time and where to locate special effects, and all of that.
And what was great about that chart was down underneath the turntable, we made a full-size chart like that. So there were like minute hands all around the 200 feet diameter, and pre-computer, so we didn't have to go to the computer guys. We could go down there, turn the machine off, go down there and slide a little bracket thing 2 seconds, then go up and write it again and see if it was in sync and it was in the right place. So we all had that capability, whereas now you have to call in an engineer who comes out and burns some new proms and all this stuff that,
So
you know.
All the while not knowing that we were making Bob Holland's life and other
Yeah.
people's life a living nightmare.
So in that process, did you have to get you had to get the turntable right first? That almost set the speed of the ride,
Yeah.
really, and the capacity and the way that the vehicles went
The
into
length
the
of
building.
the music.
Right.
It had to, because as the tail out on One Little Spark ends, it's also the beginning for the one that's replacing you coming in. So that was a circle, and it all had to be, you couldn't get out of sync. You couldn't have the speed of the turntable be one fragment off from the speed of the music. So it was, for 1982, it was an extraordinary engineering accomplishment. And, you know, people would ride it and they didn't know what was going on. Are we moving, or is it moving, or how's this happening? But what they were experiencing there was, I think, probably one of the miracles of pre-computer design and technology. We better get, if that clock is right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So now we're in the Dreamport.
Yeah, we just landed with all the stuff we've collected, and we're storing it in the Dreamport, which is a metaphor for whether it's your notebook or your VCR or your phone or your head, a place where all of these things exist forever. And we all have earworms in there that you can play back anytime you want, better than any collected music thing, you know, iTunes or whatever. We started with what is a Dreamport? So we thought, well, it's probably the most imaginative things that have ever been created, the most amazing objects. You know, so these were all the greatest this and the greatest that. And you can see we placed it somewhere floating above the earth. So if you look over in that second photo, you can see the hole in the floor looking down at a city like Peter Pan above Neverland. And then you force yourself, if you're diligent, to look at it and say, what does that mean to anybody? It means that everyone's ruled out again, unless you're Michelangelo or Eiffel, you know, or these great people that created these things. So we threw it all out and started over again and decided it has to be a collection of things that we encounter in our everyday world, whether it's a bee or a rainbow or a leaf on a plant or whatever, and assemble that and then put it together in an amazing way. And that's where John Stone could take these abstract ideas, and I would just do a little pen and ink sketch. Yeah, I got it. You don't need to do it anymore. I got it. And then you'd come back an hour later, and it would all be rough, but there. And so it wasn't any skin off his, you know, anger or anything if he had to throw it out and start again. It was just an hour's work. But the basic, like I said, the idea was there, so it was good, and then you could embellish it and go on and add the detail to it. So this became I think the most where John Stone really excelled, because the Dreamport was everything. It wasn't one thing. It wasn't like art or literature. It was everything that had been collected. So then we move on to art, and I think what do we got?
Let me do one more thing, because
Yeah.
the odor, the scent, is
yeah.
like one of the most distinct
They've already
things
had
in there.
that spiel today with the oranges, which were far more pleasant than our roses, which it polluted the entire building. I mean, like when you got out of your car, we would park right behind there, and you'd open the car door, and yes, it was humid, but it was also roses. You know, if the door was even a crack open in the back, the whole back of between what is it? Canada,
Yeah.
and Imagination.
Inland,
Just,
yeah. But people love that smell, it turns out. Tony and I were not appreciative
well, if
of
you
it.
lived in it 24 hours a day.
Well, also, I mean, my thing was that I had a grandma who over-perfumed, and you'd get stuck in the car. And then there was someone at work who also over-perfumed. And a wonderful person, very
Yes.
wonderful person. But you'd leave, and you would be smelling like roses for the rest of the day. And so we kept trying to get that aroma switched out. The first time it was introduced, it's like, okay, but no, it should be something more like honeysuckle. You know,
Unusual.
Unusual, yeah, and sweet, but unusual. And so that was one of the first change orders was, you know, change that out. Well, that should be no problem. You know, it's just these little beads, and we swap them out. And ask 3 months later, you know, a month later, we're open now. A year later, it's the same. Why? And I never got an answer until recently.
It's all solved now.
Yes,
You
it
smell
is.
skunk.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Much better, much better.
It turns out the reason they never swapped it out was because the person who ordered it in the first place ordered like 10 years worth of it.
Now I've got another smell to go back and get for you. I'll get
Yeah,
another
right.
smell. So I'll see if I can track
Right.
it.
I don't want a skunk packet.
No, I'll
sitting
get you the
next
rose.
to me.
And I was told that it wasn't rose, it was camellia or something else, but to me it smelled like roses.
Okay, so we're now moving into the construction area where we recombine and create new things. So to lead off the art area, and let's go on to the next one here with Dreamfinder, which was the most cliche thing that everyone thinks about imaginative people and whatnot. They're artists, so we've got to start with art, but you've got to see a piece of art that you've never seen before. And again, this is before projection mapping and all the things that are tools we use in theater today everywhere. And we met a woman who was a phenomenal artist with a product. She coined the name Collage, and it used what do you call it, polarization on materials. And by spinning a wheel behind that wall, it would transform it. So you'd see a swan appear, and that would disappear, and a fish would come out as Dreamfinder hit it with that optic fiber brush.
It was cellophane, right?
Yeah,
Was the
and it was kind of delicate. And of
Right.
course, the guys came in and washed it with the Ajax cleaner one
Yeah.
night, and it bled into the panels of cellophane and whatnot. So they had to restore it. But it was a beautiful entry. And then she had an abstraction in her art that was very similar to Walt Paraguay. And so we showed Walt what she was doing, and then Walt immediately conjured up this thing, which, again, I'm going to give emphasis here to John Stone, who took Walt's abstractions into reality. And then there's another step in this, who it was done by this was the first experience I had with Bruce Gordon, who became one of my best partners at Imagineering, and would go beyond the limit to do something, whereas he would never file a change order. He would just say, I think I can take 2 carpenters in there tonight, we'll just get it done, and so that was, we did Splash Mountain, we did New Fantasyland with Tom, and it was just a wonderful relationship. So again, John would whip these things out, and then Walt would come and I would look at it, and then we went on, and it came out beautiful. It was something, it's interesting again, because Walt could do this, John could interpret it. I wouldn't have had a clue how to abstract art in this way. I loved Austine's work, and we worked with her, but this was, this was really, no, they weren't smoking anything. In fact, that's Bruce Gordon in the middle of that shot, right there working on. And it was called Lexan. I think Trevor was using a term about plastic, but it was called Lexan. And we put I think you probably had it in that pavilion too, in the land. There was a de-static system that was in there that would keep it from getting lint that would adhere from the static electricity.
Yeah, when they sandblasted that, they discovered it would start arcing like a Tesla coil or
Is that Jim? Jim, is that you in the middle? No. It's not you. Okay, it's hard to see from here.
No, that's Bruce Gordon in the
Gordon,
middle.
okay.
In the brown, not in the plaid, but in the brown with the glasses.
Okay.
Yeah. And okay,
Ring the bell. Oh, we got it.
Okay, we got some. Oh, great.
Oh,
okay.
yeah.
Now, see, I learned something about my show today. Thank you very much. So the next one I love because, again, this was probably done by Andy Gaskell in about 1980. Yeah. And if you look down in the bottom center, you will see Spider-Man there. Now, here in Florida, you aren't allowed to have a Spider-Man in a Disney park because of a deal we did. But in California and everywhere else in the world, he's a Disney character now. So I guess we were just ahead of the game, imagining that. But this was, again, and we talked about how letters begin the process of thinking creatively with vocabulary. And you start with the 26 letters, and they can be combined into a million different things that create images in our brain. And so that became the premise. So we'd see the letters being exploded out of a IBM Selectric volcano. And then beginning to get, substance as Figment changes the word cat into the word bat, and then more complicated with Sparkle and Dazzle and Avalanche and whatnot. And then genies popped out and fairies popped out in full Disney animation, which was really a rare thing back in 1980, because it was about, still 8-9 years from Little Mermaid. And then down into what was our first, right here is where we implemented one of 3 speed sequences. Now, you all remember how fast it went and how you giggled and laughed when it went fast? No? Well, there's a good reason for that. And I think you heard some of that this morning, that we'd already asked these ride vehicles to jump on and off of a moving turntable and not get crushed. If they decided not to jump on that turntable, they had to send a signal out to tell all the other vehicles to pace themselves accordingly. And that meant we couldn't release one free fall down into the monster book. We couldn't release one free fall down into the science area. And the worst of all was when you take the excited picture of everybody at the end, we couldn't take them speeding through that moment either. So they're all sitting there in the video kind of like that, rather than, excitement. So this was the first one. And now we are connecting them all together into the mystery story, which was, again, selecting the cliche of one element of all the things you can do with letters and phrases and sentences, which was to create a mystery story, because it's everyone can think of Dark and Stormy Night and all that. So then, pow, we flipped the motion right into, theater. And we had Figment assembling the props and costumes and all that. And we went to Michael Cedino, who is a young animator at the studio, who was eager to invent something and loved the idea of coming out of animation, coming over there. And he was going to take us into the first fully animated laser, images. And we were running late in Epcot. The budget for the whole project was escalating. And we would have had to develop a whole new system for storing the amount of computations to maneuver the laser with complicated Disney animation. So at the last minute, they pulled the plug from his project, and he ended up with the geometrics of notes and little cubicle things and stuff like that Dreamfinder was orchestrating, and it passed. I mean, it was something nobody had ever seen, laser beams that had any physical shape to them. So we did get to that point, and we'll come back and do it later. Never happens. Don't ever let anyone tell you we're going to pick it up on the first rehab, because it never does.
And they were supposed to be dancers, right? That
yes.
was the idea.
Well, the image that sold Kodak was one of a ballerina dancing in a water droplet at sunset. And the idea, Kodak film has allowed us to not just see the ballerina, which we can see with our eyes, but a crowning water droplet happens in a microsecond. And we could slow it down with film to make it happen at the same speed as she does the pirouette. And we could speed the sunset up so that it went whoosh, at the same moment. And so we took that image up there, and they said, sold. They're going to do it. So the next one is, how do we get out of that exuberant thing? And every meeting we had, John Simons was one of the Kodak engineers, and they had Photoshop, they had all this stuff, all in copyright, or what do you call them, and patents for everything digital, but they were afraid of it. And so they never moved into digital, and it cost them their company. But they were always saying to us, what about science? You keep talking about theater and music and all this stuff, but what about science? So we'd never get to the end of the meeting without John saying, well, what about science? So we had to get out of the theater backstage and into this vortex that was the second speed ramp thing intended to be. And as you whoosh down through that, you would hear, what about science, science, science? What about science, science, science? The next room was so complicated. I did that, bird's eye, to explain how this was circle vision, if you didn't know, shooting from in the center below the Dreamfinder with a crank. The projectors were all down there, hitting mirrors, and then they had to cross over just out of the reach envelope of the guests and get through that portal, which was cut to match how the anamorphic distortion would put it out on the screen beyond that. So we had to rebuild and build the model over and over again to get all that to work right. And again, this was the realization of what we showed Kodak, that Kodak film could wind a dial and allow you to see things that move too fast or too slow, and it can zoom us out to outer space or down to micro imagery, and we can now see things to imagine from that our eyes alone can't see. So it was a perfect finale blend for ending the show on the Kodak note. And then we passed.
Kodak had to be thrilled to see
film
in there, right? Actual film.
And then so we had to pass by an awful piece of track that was where we take the vehicles on and off. And you just saw it briefly in the film of Dreams and whatnot. And it was really hard to keep that up because if they'd wash it, it would smear and take the paint off of the glow-in-the-dark paint. And we kept hoping you'd look at the word Dreams and not at this track over here that had a black curtain over it. And then you had Figment and Dreamfinder saying there's no limit to what you can do with your imagination. And then the third drop was down through the, here we go with a shameless plug, the rolls and rolls of Kodak film, you know, down into the finale. And I think, is that the last slide?
I think that's the last slide.
Okay, so in that last scene, it was another circle vision, and we totally run out of money. And so I thought, what if we print this on 16 millimeter film with an anamorphic lens on it, and we can get 2 images out of 1 projector? And then we had no budget to do the animation Figments at the end, so we called on Bob Barker Marionettes in downtown, and they're still in business down there. Bob has passed away, but they still do puppet shows. And Bob came in and put the hot melt Figment on his arm, and they weigh like 50 pounds or something, and tried to hold it up, and was down below the set. And I remember I told the director, can't you get a television so he can see what the thing goes? Are you the director on this? And I said, well, I guess I should be, because you're, you know. So we managed to get those, but those were intended to be full-on animation.
Do you think that them being the puppets added to the show rather than animation?
Maybe.
Because he came alive at the end.
He was really Figment.
Yeah,
too.
he was
It
Figment
really
at that
Figment.
point, and you could see him in these situations and flying and
Well,
doing
you know,
things.
you're probably right as a guest that enjoyed it, and we
Yeah.
were just disappointed because we thought it was going to be full Disney animation.
Right.
But I think you're right, because Figment was right there in the room as an automatronic, and so those looked like that because it was the same skin that it was performing. And Bob did a Herculean job with it, and he did it himself. It was actually Bob Baker in that. So you let me hear a surprise I hadn't heard for a long time. After that moment in the show, Dreamfinder now points the camera, which took your picture as you were thrillingly going down in this room, and says, what about you folks? Figment and I want to invite you to the Dreamport where you'll get time to do these things. So that was the end of the ride as it ended tonight, and that audio doesn't exist. And these guys found it somewhere. It was hard for you to understand.
I shot it.
Yeah.
I shot it. We tried to clean up the sound.
Yeah.
We'll do a better job of cleaning it up because
Yeah.
it was a little.
So I'm sitting there going, oh my God, I haven't heard that in so long. You know?
It's a little muddied in the beginning. Howe had most of it, and there was a little part cut off, and then there were actually 2 different segments. So I believe some cars heard one and some cars heard another. So it's almost there, but yeah, we want to try to find some more and clean it up a little bit better, because you're right, that's of all the Dreamfinder audio, that's the lost piece. So.
Okay, let's get upstairs so we can get this guy involved.
Yeah.
Okay.
So real quick, you wanted to make sure that we pointed out something about
Silver halide crystals.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, that beautiful rendering was done by Dan Guzet. And I think just prior to that, several of the people on the team were throwing out ideas for the facade. And I threw one out that was crystal. Mike Lloyd, remember Mike Lloyd was on the team too.
The opening dome thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Open,
And Michael Lloyd did one too. And but Dan Guzet just
nailed it.
Nailed it.
I'll run back to that guy.
And I didn't know about quite about the silver halide until maybe a couple of years later, I guess.
Here's a trivia, Dan Guzet. Anytime you see that sparkle on either Disney or a James Bond rendering, you know that Dan because they did it. That was
Right,
his
right. Yeah, he
trademark
did the
thing.
Moonraker
Even
one.
Splash Mountain, the big painting that we did, has that same
And
sparkle.
So just real quickly, I was the de facto architect on this because we didn't have one, as I mentioned earlier. And so I worked out the geometry of those, based on Dan's drawing. And we had a kind of a funny situation happen as part of the budget downsizing. One of the architectural executives suggested, in order to save money, that we make the second crystal out of stucco and paint it with shiny paint.
But I had an in with Kodak, and I called them and I said, when you come down, they're going to try and whitewash this thing and tell you that it's stucco. And Bob said, I get it. I know what I have to do. And so when the presentation went, Bob said, what is it? That looks like it's stucco over there. And I said, yeah, we think we can paint it with shiny paint and it's going to look terrific, And I said, no, it's got to be clear, and we want you to stand in there and get the nature colors and everything. So, fortunately, again, Kodak.
So the inspiration, though, was this. So this is an electron microscope view of silver halide, is that right? Or is it just a microscopic view?
It's a microscopic view of silver halide crystals. And you can see that they are triangular, hexagonal, but most interestingly, some of the triangle ones are, truncated or beveled,
right,
if you will. And I never looked up silver halide crystals until very recently, so I always took it on everyone's word that it was silver halide. And one day I thought, well, let's just see about that. And sure enough, it was great to see that Dan had done his
and this is the base of photographic film, so that's how it ties in between.
And I'll tell you that John Simons at Kodak just about died when he saw that. He goes, oh my God, you've listened to us. That's our business, silver halide photography. So that was a nod to them.
Do you want to run through some of the construction photos?
We can do that real quick. I certainly want to make sure that we get wrestled. So if you go through them real quickly, I can't remember if you took these or I took these. I know I took a heck of a lot of construction photos, some of which I'm still scanning and in the process of going through.
We were all young, like Trevor said, and we couldn't believe we were there and that they were building these massive things, and we're, in our 20s and early 30s, and it just was crazy.
Yeah. So scene 4, I believe, there, and you have a good shot of the Imaginometer in there.
No, I don't think so.
Oh,
that's
darn.
Ted Seberg building the core of the center load unload, and the now replaced. We had to walk upstairs or take an elevator because we couldn't afford that second turntable up.
We briefly considered a helical escalator. Remember that Otis had just developed?
Toshi Muto was the designer of the murals in there, and she had an Asian background, of course, and it gave it a different look. I wouldn't say Mary Blair, but she had a distinctive style too that we looked at and we said, that's perfect. We're going to do the whole thing and let her take her take on it, so it had a special feeling. Yeah.
So we are upstairs now in the ImageWorks, finally.
Another Austin collage there. Yeah, at the entrance.
And this should, come on, do it. Do the trick. It's not going to do the trick for me. Oh. It's supposed to change colors. I set up the whole thing so it would do the polarization effect, but it's not working.
Great.
All right, so here we are in ImageWorks. Oh, look, there's a tunnel. Yeah. Rainbows.
You missed your chance to go through it, but that's how it looked in the first idea of how I was going to sit there. And the idea of the ImageWorks, and Barry Braverman was producer on this, we went up to the Exploratorium in San Francisco, which is still there, but it's kind of become more commercial. It was really a kind of hippie-like thing that had sort of developed, and nothing would meet code or anything up there, but you got some really great ideas out of it. And so the Rainbow Corridor, which was across the way, originally was to follow you were assigned a color that went with you as you moved through it into an area called the sensor, where we had all these different ways of interfacing with a sound, and I think we're going to get into that now.
So here's, if this, oh, here we go.
Does it bring back any memory?
Yes, it does.
stumbled into getting to help with this, right? You started in the model shop, but you were a curious person.
Yes, so I was 18 at the time that all this was happening, and I was in a basically kind of a paid summer internship situation that I had badgered my way into. And I was fortunate enough to get to do a little of, or at least work a little bit on each of the certainly things that were attractions that had animatronics or major special effects in Future World and American Adventure and whatnot. Totally behind the scenes support work, doing quick either mechanical drawings or sketches or what have you. Got involved in a couple of all hands on deck in the model shop moments, which was fun, and Harriet Burns was amazing. And yeah, was pinching myself because these were my heroes. And, but you know, we've heard several times, I think, yesterday and today about people who, as part of this project, it changed their lives, and it certainly changed mine because I was kind of being encouraged toward art by my parents, and but I had this out of control hobby of music and sound. And one day, as I was doing my intern stuff, and I found myself waiting for the shuttle between all the buildings we had spread out to on the loading dock of electrical engineering. A young electronics engineer named Greg Kadorian, who I will forever be indebted to. He was just standing out there, and I wasn't really listening, but the word synthesizer came out of his mouth, and I went, and what he was expressing was that, I mean, he could take apart a synthesizer and put it back together blindfolded, but what he didn't really know what to do is what to do with one. There's a whole, you know, art/science of how you manipulate these things to create whatever sounds you can dream up. So I heard him expressing this, and I'm thinking, okay, when I was young, I went to the Walt Disney Story, and that speech of Walt said, just try out for the band. It doesn't matter whether you're fully qualified or not, go take a chance, march in the parade. So I normally was shy, but I ambled over to him, and I just said, I couldn't help overhear you were talking about synthesizers. And it turns out what they were trying to do was come up with a way to make stepping tones work. I didn't know anything about ImageWorks. I didn't even know it was there or what stepping tones was, but he described that there would be these sensors in the floor, and they wanted it to play these sounds, and that people moving through the room would create this soundscape. And they were investigating these. They were actual synthesizers that would be in a rack behind the scenes somewhere. In theory, synthesizing sounds live based on the signals from the floor mats. And anyway, he said, can you help us figure out whether this will work? And we had some back and forth, and I felt what they had there was going to be too unstable and not repeatable. And one thing led to another, and Imagineering, WED was a pioneer in digital audio recording, or at least the use of it, for Epcot Center specifically. And so ideas started kind of falling into place. Well, we don't want to have any moving parts. We don't want to have tape. But could small amounts of digital sound be stored on chips? Well, no one knew, EEPROMs were still kind of erasable chips or things you could do. That all seemed very space age, and it was at the time. But one way or another, that led to this idea that, okay, well, Disney was just starting to, I think, first time in its history, I'm sure the Alcorns will correct me if I'm wrong, were commissioning the construction of specialized hardware that was really designed, like amplifiers, things like that would be, we could buy a couple thousand of, and there would be replacement parts, and you could hot pull them out when one was broken and fix it and jam one back in there, things like that. And it happened that digital audio stored on chips had found its moment. So I basically just kind of gave him a nudge in that direction. And that led to me meeting Barry Braverman, and just over time, I kind of never left for the better part of 20 years, and that was my pivot into doing music and sound full time as my career. But then back to stepping tones. So I mean, that's why it was important to me. But then it's also important that stepping tones, you know, we went through ideas of like, I know I had done an oral mock-up of what it might sound like if it sounded like a musical score was being created by the guests. And we decided ultimately, again, through iteration, that it would make more sense if people really knew that what they were doing. Like, if you just played a flute line that was buried into the, you know, kind of slipped into the context of a piece, someone who's just not, you know, musically inclined or whatever might not get it. So we thought, let's be more direct. And a gentleman named Denny Yeager was called in, who was working with an instrument called the synclavier, which wound up being a big part of the Michael Jackson sound down the road and things like that. And he ended up creating all these little sounds you hear. And we weren't able to find the separated sounds. So I'm one of the people who had gone through recording everything live for reasons. And so we pieced together that little bit. But it's just, I just think it's really significant because I never saw anyone in there with a sad face. I know it sounds kind of corny, but it's just...
Adults and children, too.
The second you got off this ride with all the messages these gentlemen have just described, you got an immediate sense, because you pretty much, I think, had to go through stepping tones to get to the rest of it. Mm-hmm. And some of the other things were just as amazing, but took a little bit more study, like, you know, how do I operate the Philharmonic or something like that. This was so immediate. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was the perfect transition into what ImageWorks was about.
I think Tom showed us some pictures during construction, and the construction guys were in there early in the morning, just tapping around.
We were in there early in the morning too.
We also have to thank Russell too. If you went into the Rainbow Room with the Rainbow Corridor, he had some of the original recordings of.
Live.
We couldn't find anything of what that sounded like, so that was his recordings in the Rainbow Corridor.
I was the creepy guy loitering until most of the guests, enough guests had left.
You and Hal would have been great, but and actually, you guys somehow communicated years ago.
Oh, so in the old days, I guess it was over CompuServe, like Usenet.
CompuServe.
We met, CompuServe. We met, and we started trading audio tapes. Like that we would both record in live, you know, at the parks.
And so. My employment with the company came and went a couple of different times. But when I got my biggest gig there, which was in '95, where I worked on Tokyo Disney Sea, I quietly resigned from the group because I didn't want it to get. But I was an early proponent of. Well, it wasn't until the Disneyland and Walt Disney World Forever project that the company finally realized people want this stuff. They want the background music. They want the Sherman Brothers songs, absolutely. But you know, there's a whole. I'll just plug. You know, there's a whole hour of music in the Living Seas Pavilion,
right.
And there's there was a whole hour of stuff in the Future World Interventions that I got to do. And
we played that too, if you were listening.
Yeah.
I don't know if you heard.
So
it,
just for full disclosure, Russell did the 90s Interventions loop that we all grew up with. That's his music.
So I really appreciate that. That was a chance to do something original, except for my quotations of of these themes. And, you know, it was a bookend moment for me because, again, I'd always loved the music. If you've read any articles that I've been mentioned in, I talk about how I first discovered the power of sound when I was at Haunted Mansion opening week at Disneyland and heard the sound of the wind tuned to play the theme, Grim Grinning Ghosts. And I stopped suddenly in the hallway, and everyone's piling up behind me like a train car. And my parents are like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Listen to the wind. It's playing." And they're like, "You're 6. What are you talking about?" But that changed my life. And then like 10 years later, I met Tony Baxter because of just a quirk of luck of knowing someone who happened to know him, and I got a tour of the place. This was while he was in installation phase of his little runaway train ride, and then so Epcot it was just so important to so many people in this room, and every time someone teared up, I was right there with you, and Tomorrow's Child really let the floodgates go because there's something about music, and I will say John Hench said one of my favorite quotes, which is, "You can't whistle the architecture." I'll save the rest for another time. I want to make sure we cover everything, but it's just, that was so important, you know, and I can't believe I'm up here with these guys 30 years later.
Does anyone remember what this is?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, well, Dreamfinder School of Drama, again, we were racing to the finish line, and we had the need here to produce 3 films that the guests could be matted into with a front plate and a back plate, and score and music and actors. And we had already released Chuck McCann from his Dreamfinder duties, which he did for the score, or the recordings downstairs. So we've got to grab someone, you know, right there and now. And we looked at this guy in the model shop called Joe Rohde. And I mentioned Pete Stugart, who's in the jeans, turned towards Joe Rohde behind the bar. This is a scene on the set. We brought all of those extras are Disneyland employees and Disneyland costuming, and we filmed 3 films. One was a Western, one was a outer space epic, and the third was a fairy tale. And then we put them in there, and there are really no good views of this because the guests saw a little tiny monitor on an old CRT above a blue wall where their children were performing. And like many of the exhibits here, it was obviously done with video, which was a cuss word for the Kodak company. Because I said, you know, we can put some RCA jacks, another name that they don't want to, on there, and you could get, you know, a digital thing into your camera, because camcorders then were this thing that had all these inputs and then a cord that went over your shoulder to a giant camera. But there were people that were using them, myself included. And so we said, we can offer that. Kodak will never, ever produce a digital image. And they practically didn't, you know. They stuck to their word. But anyway, so this is that set. And we might have a few.
We have a few select clips.
You may have seen this out in the, when it was up.
So here's a couple clips.
Oh, how nice of you to drop by. You're just in time to star in my new story. Rather strange travelers appear.
Tad Stone, wow, Barry Braverman,
They forever bother me
Larry
with
Gertz,
such silliness. There never
Pete
was such
Stugart
thing as
on the end.
Giants! Duck! Watch out! Don't let him knock you off the... The wizard's magic bubble floated for miles. We've got to try to stick together. Let's try jumping in time. 1, 2, 3! Come on! Act like you're jumping! You don't have to leave the ground? Just pretend you're floating far. Let's see if this jet powder really works. Now stamp your feet to ignite it. Now, follow me. We're free.
Let's see how tough they really are. Huh?
Imagination. Watch this. Whoa! Grab the rope and tug.
I'm just
Don't let
waxing.
loose. Watch it. Now. Bravo! Nice performance. I bet there's a couple of future film stars in the group. Thank you very much. And now, if you'll kindly step off stage to your left, I'll get things ready for our next performance.
Todd, did you restore that?
I did. I restored those and AI'd them, and then we have the 3 full that we played in the Centurion.
Yeah.
But we'll have to do a movie night with you, and we'll show you the full
sent
clips.
him some terrible. It was called Umatic. It was like a 3/4-inch giant thing, and it had all distorted and everything, and you pulled it back from the grave. So that was the best it's been seen, and probably will ever be seen. So.
Yeah, we had fun with that.
So I think you want to wrap up?
Yeah,
I think we're ready to wrap up, yeah.
We're here out front. When we opened, the ride didn't make it for opening day. The 3D movie done by Murray Lerner, who did a film called Sea Dreams out at Marineland here in St. Augustine. We had gone up there with Randy Bright and determined this would be a really unique thing, and that was 16 millimeter. And Randy said, we're going to do it not in 35 millimeter, but in 70 millimeter, twin 70 millimeter. Everything was great. Opening day, it was going to be our only show with, I think we had the ImageWorks.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
And then I'll get into fountains in a minute. But so I go in there. We looked at it that night before, and it was stunning. So I go in the morning just to make sure, and it's on the loop, so it's running already. Put on the glasses, and it was double images. And I'm going, what is different? That night before, the carpenters came in and put a glass in the window between the projector. So I grabbed, there was the carpenter out and working outside. This is early in the morning on October 1. And he had a hammer. And I said, can I borrow your camera? And I went in there and I busted. And in came all the security guards, and they thought I was trying to sabotage the opening day. And, and I felt guilty because I was breaking this expensive glass and all that. But I finally straightened it out, and we got that open. And then you came out of the 3D movie and went through the fountains, which Mark Fuller's group had come up with the Leapfrog fountain. And it was interesting because both Reader's Digest and Time Magazine said the runaway hit of Epcot on opening day was the movie and those dancing fountains. So, we were so disappointed that we didn't have a ride. But we got incredible response from that movie. It was a stunning film, and it kind of opened up what is now the normal release pattern for movies to this day. They come out in 3D IMAX, and then filter on down through the rest of the thing. So this was where it happened. Yeah, so. Yeah.
There they are.
Ron didn't make it today, did he? Ron Schneider?
No, I don't believe he was able to come.
Yeah,
so,
that's too bad.
We were hoping to have Ron here, one of the original Dream Finders.
So when you go out and see the Godzilla figment, just remember he's supposed to look like that.
That's right. Well, Tom, Russell, Tony, we super appreciate you coming. I know there are a lot more stories we have to explore with all of you. We got to dive into an episode with you on music, and Tom, you've got stories, and Tony, I mean, well, we could talk with imagination and everything else for eons.
We should also mention Skip Lang as being
Oh,
one
yes.
of the key people involved, particularly with art directing the attraction in the field. And he was really the guy that I think Barry handed the ImageWorks activities to and spent a lot of time. Believe it or not, the ImageWorks stuff was built in Virginia, in Alexandria, by a company that specialized in exhibitry and industrial interactive games like that. And Skip really pulled that all together and is responsible for things like the Rainbow Corridor.
Spent many hours at night massaging his head underneath the pin screens.
So we'll have to come back for the next one. We'll do an entire panel on ImageWorks too, in deep detail, because there's a lot to talk about there too. So a lot. Well, gentlemen, I really appreciate your time. We'll be back in just a quick second to wrap things up, and we'll go from there. So thank you very much.